Today's focus is going to be on medical affairs and medical communications. Dr. Prem Sundivakkam. Dr. Prem Sundivakkam is a director of medical affairs and communications at Astellas Pharmaceuticals. Dr. Sundivakkam got his PhD in pharmacology and vascular biology from India. After that, he did his postdoctoral training from University of Illinois at Chicago. His postdoctoral time, he was funded by American Heart Association and American Endodontics Association. He is very well published with 25 highly cited peer-reviewed research manuscripts and has served on editorial board of several different journals. After which he actually ended up doing MBA from University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign with concentration in strategy and leadership. Prem is a subject matter expert and a thought leader who's committed to developing effective medical strategies and scientific content with actionable insight.
Yeah, well, don't be shy. I've been there. I'm still shy, and I understand what exactly you all are going through together. So just shoot me any questions, and I will definitely love to help with an answer. If I don't have an answer, at least I'm good at finding the answers for you. So don't worry about it. So here's my contact information. I'm going to share it with you all. I'll be more than excited to be connected via LinkedIn, or you can send me an email. We can always work together. And I love that opportunity to get connected with you. So having said that, I was congratulating you before as well, and I just wanted to congratulate you again and again because you're one among the very few people in the world who have a PhD. In fact, you are almost less than 1%, almost 1% of the population in the United States who has a PhD. So we all should be proud of our achievements so far, and then we need to know how to capitalize that credentials we have and the experience we have. Well, I just wanted to start with a small story, which I always like, and about this is by David Wallace, and I'm probably sure that some of you might have heard this story before. So there are these two young fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way, right? Who nods at them, says "Hey guys, how's the water?" And two young fish swimming a little bit for a while, for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks over at the other and goes, "What the hell is water?" Right? This is an interesting story because before I say that, if you're thinking or if you're worried that I'm planning to exhibit myself as a wiser old fish explaining what is water to you as an younger fish, let me tell you, I'm not the wise old fish. I'm still the fish trying to find my own directions. But what I can tell you is that we must first acknowledge the unconscious default setting of our minds. I was there before, I'm still there most of the time, and I strongly believe this is still a countercultural in mainstream society. So that's something we might want to just get off of our minds and then open for many opportunities just right in front of us. So I'm not here to just give you a lecture or show you some data or maybe give some philosophical interpretation of my own. That's not what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to make it very simple both ways. That I'm just going to spend another maybe 5 or 10 minutes to show you what I do and what worked for me, what didn't work for me, and then what all crazy things I did during my journey and to be here, and what I'm planning to do in the future, which I believe is going to take me to the next level where I wanted to be, right? And and the next thing is I wanted to talk a little bit about the medical affairs function itself, because I learned from Harinder yesterday that most of you are interested to learn about what medical affairs function and what they do, how it's being structured within an organization or any pharmaceutical industry for that matter. So I thought maybe I'll just pull up one slide. I put together some information to show how this organization is structured and the vast amount of opportunities you might have if you decide to move into a medical affairs function. So like I was mentioning, there is no stage, that would say okay, here you go. Here's where you would transition my career. So there's no stop point. There's no pause point. There's no stage at which you would decide you would go. So if you decide, do it today, or you should have done it yesterday. That's what I always think. So you have taken the right step, and I think you are open to listen to a person like me who have very limited experience to share, to hear my experience and so on. So that's the first step we have taken. I've taken that step as well in my life. I don't know if you can see my whole screen. So this is my career journey. I mean, this is a typical postdoc journey. This is nothing exciting, nothing new, and I'm sure like you have done most of it. In fact, you would have done it better than me. And but I thought maybe I'll just start by just sharing my own journey. That way, it makes sense to understand like what I'm talking about, right? So yeah, I did spend like 4 years in my postdoctoral training, and I've been a American Art Association, as Harinder said, for 2 years, and I did my MBA. And during that period, I always wanted to be in the other side of science, like, because I always believed that science is something which I love, but more than that, I wanted to take science to a different path and put my interpersonal and emotional intelligence skills into it and see how best I can do use the science which I've learned and practiced over like decades. You know, so these are the things which I did. Some things might make sense, some things may not. And the reason I did these things is because I always wanted to be in the business side of science, like I was mentioning before. So I thought I just wanted to understand the fundamentals of business that involved in taking the science to the commercialization pathway. And how does people look at science from outside of scientific industry? That's all I wanted to understand. So that was the reason I kind of volunteered in multiple places. I spent my time mostly working with these organizations to understand, where I can fit well. And that's pretty much what I did. And I did teach in a lot of mid school and high school because being an immigrant, my communication skills I always believe that I need to improve my communication skills. And then I wanted to see if I can get anything out of it by volunteering in multiple different places. And most of all, I would say I met, I don't know, maybe 250 is even less. I met like many people across the world, and I mean virtually and also in person. I drove like a couple of miles to meet with them. I still wonder why I did that, but that actually gave me a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge, and a lot of learnings out of it. So I guess I don't know if I can say anything in specific that helped me to move here or there. That I don't think I can say that, but it's a combination of multiple things which I had in my career, that I believe had worked out. And I had a lot of failures, I should say, but what you see now is based on what I did in the past. I also wanted to take a few minutes before I just open up, for discussion. Is that if you're interested in medical affairs function, I should say like this is the right time to consider, because medical affairs function, not like before, it has changed. It's been evolving drastically, and it's been growing every day. Every organization is bringing this medical affairs function into the limelight, and they involve medical affairs function all the back from preclinical stage to the post-launch and post-approval studies and in the marketing stage. So medical affairs is in every aspect of a product life cycle in therapeutic landscape or whatsoever. So I guess there are tremendous amount of opportunities in medical affairs function in any pharmaceutical industry, big or large or small. So I should say this is the best time, and the organizations had clearly understood the value of medical affairs, and I can tell from my own perspective in my organization, we have over 950 people. Ours is a mid-sized company, and it's not like Pfizer or it's not like Johnson & Johnson, but still we have almost close to 1,000 people across the globe working for medical affairs function. So there's tremendous opportunities, and it's the best thing to be. I'm really happy that I made through this, and I'm here in the medical affairs function, which I really enjoy every day what I do. Things like that. So medical affairs function, I don't know how much you know, some of you might, and some of you may be still wondering what's medical affairs function, what is medical affairs per se itself, and I should say medical affairs is nothing but taking the complicated science and putting together into a simpler format, so every walks on every steps are easily translatable, and people can understand, take it to the external world, external stakeholders, to the market, and communicate the right science at the right time at the right people. It's pretty much what medical affairs would do in a simpler terms. In addition to that, of course, we do make sure all the safety and efficacy concerns of any product or the perspective within specific to any population or any geospatial regions and so on. But in a nutshell, medical affairs is nothing but taking the science to the people, to the end users, technically. That's pretty much what it is. And the tree view, what you see here is like, this is how at least our organization is split into. I'm sure like if you go to different organizations, you might see little different names, but these are the divisions you might see within the medical affairs function. It's kind of segregated in global level, regional level, and affiliate level. And you would see like the core medical teams working on the product strategy and product life cycle and plan for what's next coming. And their medical communication, which is then split into MedInfo and scientific communications team. Like they work both internally and externally with the external stakeholders or internal stakeholders. And there are like medical training teams, like medical education teams, like, integrated medical education, by the way, and publications team and Congress plannings, and you can name it. Like there are a lot of different opportunities. In fact, I heard from one of the meetings yesterday that we are forming a new team, which I listed out here as well, is patient centricity. Because what we're trying to understand is how to bring this real world evidence data into the industry, and then so that we can make our products better for our patients. So there are a lot of opportunities across. That's all I can say. And most of the organizations are now working in to see how they can make that information, their medical affairs information, into a digitalized format. We all understand and believe that that's the only way we can optimize the uptake of any scientific content or scientific information about the product or therapeutic area. So we are strongly encouraging that, and people with that kind of experience as well, appreciated these days and so on. So that's pretty much what I have, and I thought I will just stop here, and then maybe if I can answer any questions, I'll be more than happy to take it, and we can go from there.
Right. Thank you, Prem. If there are any more questions from people, either add in the chat or just unmute yourself and ask that question. While we're waiting for other people to ask questions, I just had a little bit of curiosity about your career journey part. Like you did PhD, postdoc, and you're very well-published scientist with 25 peer-reviewed publications and funded grants and all that. But you still decided to sort of like take a totally different path, and you did MBA. What was some of the motivation behind trying to really like get into this uncharted territory and getting in out of your comfort zone?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like everyone here, I was very excited when I was a scientist, and I love doing science, and that's we had a lot of risk in doing science. That's the most fun part of all, right? Being a scientist. So I enjoyed that journey. But at the back of my mind, I always thought like there is something I can do more in science. Like, there's something I can do better in the science. So when I was looking at it and I was kind of evaluating myself and see like what I'm good at, like what I like to do on a daily basis. When I wake up, I should be more excited, and how can I take my science in that path? And that's when I realized that I'm a person who like to speak with people. I'm the person who like to connect with people. I'm the person who love to simplify the complicated things and translate the information in a way that everyone can understand. So I thought, maybe that's what I should be focusing on. Then when I kind of explored into the options, what I would like to do, that's when I volunteered in multiple of these organizations where I understood like, what is that I need to know if I wanted to make my career in that path. And that slowly kind of helped me in a way. It equipped me to think that, okay, this is exactly what would be interesting in my career. I would be more successful just than being a scientist at that time. So it's like I said in the beginning, it's about how you marry your interpersonal skills and your emotional intelligence along with your technical or your expertise. Like, if that marriage goes well, that's when you will have a wonderful, happy family ever. So I guess, but I'm still a scientist. I still understand. My role is basically to connect the dots, take the science and make it simple, and put it in a way that it can be used and digestible by people across, different areas or industries. Like I was mentioning, I was showing in the very first slide, I didn't get a chance to speak about it, that the biggest example, like the best example I can think of being a spokesperson for scientists is Dr. Fauci, right? Because he's a scientist, but he knows how to translate the information to people who really need to understand what the science is about. So that's exactly my thinking. That's exactly what I wanted to do. I believe that I'm doing it right now, and I enjoy doing it. I hope I answered that question.
Yeah, we have a couple more questions in the chat. So first one is, in your view, what are the main differences between the role of a medical affairs professional in private industry versus government or public bodies?
Well, as a medical affairs function, like I was showing in my table, in my tree view, that there are several aspects of it, right? Like there are some, for example, in the government institutions, they're more towards building the guidelines, more towards building the best practices, which they expect all the industry across the globe to use it, or within the country to use it. Or maybe there are some government agencies specified for several specific regions, which they develop their own best practices and guidelines. So I guess in government agencies, the medical affairs function is more towards building that guidelines or best practices, which they expect the private industries or other industries would need to follow. But in terms of the private industries, I guess, like I can go back to the slide I have here. We touch upon every aspect of the product life cycle, like, from the development or from the invention to the development to the commercialization to the post-marketing studies, and bringing back the real-world evidence data back to the product development. So we focus on different aspects of the medical safety and efficacy of a product, and throughout the product landscape, throughout the therapeutic area, landscape, and so on. So I guess the pharmaceutical industries, the private industries, have much more capability in the medical affairs function when compared to the government agencies, where I believe the government agencies have limited scope in this case. I haven't worked in the government agencies, but that's a good question. Maybe I should go back and explore into that and understand better. So this is just coming out of my mind. Harinder, I think you're muted.
Sorry. So the next question is, where does clinical development fit in the pharma, and what is the role of PhD in that function?
If I heard that right, is that clinical development what you said?
That's right.
So clinical development is part of medical affairs in many industries, but in our industry, in our own company, clinical development comes in a different segment. So they're not part of the medical affairs itself. The clinical development is basically a function that works very closely with the preclinical, in the sense like the research R&D department and the medical affairs function and commercial function as well. So their role is basically to conduct the clinical studies and patient recruitment and follow up on the comparative landscape analysis of what other companies are doing, what other studies are happening, and what is the potential population that needs to be targeted, and what are the adverse events that are expected, and how to rectify that, how to resolve that issue, and so on. So I guess clinical development has its own strengths, and it kind of functions as a separate entity in Astellas Pharma, but in different other organizations, I know they're part of the medical affairs function. So PhDs have a significant role in that, and PhDs I've known, like other PharmD and MDs, PhDs have a significant role in conducting the clinical trials, and I've known many PhDs in epidemiology and in social studies are working very closely with the MDs in the clinical development function. So
we have another question, which is more sort of in terms of degree. The person wants to know do you think you need in order to have like clinical patient experience, do you need to have MD or PharmD for medical affairs, or PhD is enough? Yeah.
Well, when it comes to patient interacting with the patient population, obviously one need to have a certification, like you need to be certified when you interact with the patient. So at this point, in my understanding, I guess we have very limited ability to work with the patients directly. But most of the companies prefer MDs and who have active license on them so that they can use to work with the patients, patient recruitment or patient follow-ups during the clinical studies and so on. So to answer your question, when it comes to direct patient interactions, I think we have some limitations to work with in that kind of segment.
Okay. We have another question related to your sort of career journey on MBA side. Person wants to know if MBA is really essential to translate into a position like yours, or you've seen people who have transitioned into your role without even having MBA, but maybe other kind of experience.
No, you definitely don't need an MBA. I mean, I can guarantee that. But so the reason why I did my MBA, because I was just mentioning in my previous slide about everything that I was volunteering and doing, and I thought like I wanted to be in the business side of science, and I felt like this could be an opportunity where I can learn the fundamentals of business itself. So where I can employ my business skills effectively in science. But otherwise, I don't think you need an MBA if you have that experience or skill set. But the other thing where MBA helped me is that for the transition, because after having been spent for almost 11, 12 years, including my PhD years as a scientist, I've been branded as a scientist. I've been branded as a researcher, right? So it's hard for people to realize the fact that I also can do serve in different functions. So that in that way, I think MBA added some value to my candidacy. It doesn't apply to everyone, but to answer your question, no, there is no need to have an MBA. You can still work around without an MBA. But in my case, maybe it would have, but I know I just did my MBA because I always wanted to do an MBA, and for many reasons. And one big reason is to understand the fundamentals of science and business, so I can apply that in science effectively. It worked, and yeah, well, that's the only answer I can give. But I cannot say like you need an MBA. So that's not true.
Okay, there is one question which is more like, I think this is an interesting one, which comes from more like a transition question. Person wants to know, what are some of the skills which you directly apply which you learned during your PhD postdoctoral training, and some of the skills where you face challenges and you had to develop while when you started working in medical affairs role?
Yeah, so that's it's funny that the most dangerous thing about an academic career, at least in my own case, I should say, is that it enables my tendency to over-intellectualize the stuff, right? I usually get lost in the abstract argument inside my head. So instead of instead of simply paying attention to what's going right in front of me, I was paying more attention towards what's going on inside me. So that is, I believe, most of the PhDs, most of the academic researchers are thinking. So to your question, yes, I did have many challenges when I transitioned into this, and because I was always thinking myself as a technologist, I was always thinking about someone thinking myself as a scientist who can solve problems in the research lab. But what I didn't realize is that I can use my transferable skills and the soft skills to apply in the corporate industry. So eventually at one point, yes, I did learn. I tried to find my way to use my soft skills and transferable skills, but initially it was a challenge because I was just thinking about myself as a scientist, and I was only projecting my research publications, but I never told them the story that how I can do better in a corporate industry where the requirements are completely different. I know this is not a straightforward answer to your question, but it kind of varies between your perspective about what industry is. So I still think I'm a scientist. Like I still have a lot of troubles, especially when it comes to working with different stakeholders across different functions. Like as I work with accountants, I work with the financial people, I work with the sales people, and my job is to basically make them understand the science so that they can take the science and talk outside the organization, which is not an easy task because talking science to a salesperson and making him understand the science and the sensitivity surrounded in the science is a challenge. I'm still struggling. I'm trying my best to learn and see if I can navigate through that process and make it better. I can tell I'm getting better, but I still have a long way to go.
Great. So we have another question sort of related to the same MBA question we had before. So the person wants to know, if you were to forego an MBA degree, how would you have built your business rapport, similar to like how we as PhDs have publications to show our productivity and creativity?
So I can tell from the industry perspective, the industry is not looking for a technologist, but a thought leader who can foresee the future, and they're looking for strategists who can find solutions for the current problems. They wanted people who can find the gaps. They wanted people to find ways to fill the gaps. So I guess like in my case, what MBA did was it helped me to speak up. It helped me to see how I can project my transferable skills in a better way. And in fact, I would say like people are not looking for how many publications you have. People are looking for a story that what it took you to make that one publication. Doesn't matter which therapeutic area it is, doesn't matter what kind of journal it is. They want to know like, what is the story? Like, how did you get this paper published? Like, what is the story, the soft skill behind? What is the transferable skill behind that effort to publish that one successful research article in that? So I guess that's what a business skill would help teach you. And if you work with a lot of professionals, like I was mentioning before, I worked in venture capitalist organization. I worked in the technology management organization, where my role is like less than 10-15%. Most of the people there I need to work with is like the venture capitalists or like the business people and the people who help, the legal people, in other words, like, and people who help take any product for that matter, irrespective of what science it belongs to, take that product or that idea into the commercialization pathway. So I realized the fact at that time that, you know, it's not my science, it's how I communicate my science would make me successful. And MBA added a little flavor to it, I should say. In my case, it definitely added some flavor to it. But again, MBA is not a must. If you can get your own experience in that through different ways, maybe some of you may already have some business experience, or you may have already had some business idea you've been working on. So you may be volunteering in different organizations, in different nonprofit organizations where you are involved heavily in the business side of it. So you may already have an experience, but in my case, I didn't. So I need that MBA actually really helped me. But otherwise, you know, in general, MBA is not something expected. It's not a must.
Okay. There's another good question which comes up many times, and that is mostly when as scientists, PhDs, postdocs, we always think that I'm going to transition into an industry position which is in the same area of my research, PhD, postdoc. So well, maybe back up, like, does that really happen that if you did research in cardiovascular biology, do you also like easily, and should you be looking for cardiovascular based companies, or it's you know, you've seen people transition to multiple different focus areas. So I guess the question here is like, you know, how picky one should be in looking for a company or focus area which is based on their PhD postdoctoral training.
Sure. So let me start by saying that I worked in my PhD. I have one of my colleagues, my very close friend from Arizona here. I see his name around. So Sambat Kumar, and he and I actually worked as a vascular biologist and in diabetes research in my PhD, and I've been a vascular biologist in my postdoctoral training. But after my postdoctoral training, I never went back to my vascular biology learning. So I've been in oncology, I've been in immunology. So to answer your question, no, you don't need to have a therapeutic area specific experience in your research career to be in an industry. Because like I was mentioning in my answer to the previous question, that you don't need, I mean, the companies are not looking for what kind of techniques you know, what kind of technology you have used, and what kind of papers, where did you publish your papers, and what kind of research you have done. They are interested in that. In fact, they are interested in how do you interpret the science, how do you interpret the information, and how can you connect the dots, how can you identify the potential gaps, you know, and what it. So you can do that. You can show that just by explaining or just sharing a short story about you know, how did you get that idea per se? Like, how did you took that idea towards a publication or towards a research grant, or and what made you think like that specific idea can become a paper? And what do you think that paper or whatever you published in that paper is going to help the community? You know, how you can translate that information into the real-time value for the user needs. So that's the kind of skills, that's the kind of soft skills people are looking for. And like I was also mentioning before, that in an organization, you'll be working with different kinds of people, like varying expertise levels, like, you know, from, like I was mentioning specifically about the legal people, you know, sometimes IT people, like, you know, information science people, like sometimes you might be working with the sales people, and you should be able to speak every language of it in an organization. That's exactly what an organization is always looking for, not your technical background or your disease expertise background. It might help, but it's not what looked at. Because like I was mentioning, in the last 6 years after I moved from academic career, I never went back to my vascular biology or diabetes, you know, portfolio.
Okay, that's a wonderful sort of like shedding light on that part, which always comes up, and glad to hear that, you know, you do not have to be that picky. We have another question from Jesse, which is I mean, that's an amazing question. I think, you know, that maybe, you know, if you could elaborate on the part where how, as a medical affairs person, like, and how do you communicate with the, you know, with the people or your clientele or company or the patient population? I guess, you know, the options here are like email, person, article, or like medical affairs documents, medical writing. So can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so like I'm showing in this slide here, so every function here, what I showed here, showing here is that everyone have a different role, because, for example, from the medical and communication side, we don't communicate. Let me take back one step. So in the core medical team, they don't usually work with an external stakeholders. They always work with internal stakeholders. At the most, they would work with any alliance partners or different companies who they are working in collaboration with, or maybe they're working with any other institutions like research institutions. So their communication outside the organization is very limited to any legal partners or any, you know, we call like IAS, like the institution funded suppose. I'm sorry, I'm just blanking out. So each function has its own limitations. But when it comes to field medical, like MSL, medical science license, their role is completely communicating with the external stakeholders. They hardly work with the internal stakeholders, and they take all this information about the product or the product life cycle and take it to the external stakeholders. So their communication levels are different. They may have some email, and there are some limitations in communicating through email because there are a lot of sensitive information which they actually wanted to communicate in person or an appropriate legally approved media and so on. So to answer your question, yes, we do communicate via email, and we do meet with all the external stakeholders in many conferences, like in symposiums, and we do a lot of advisory boards where we invite many key stakeholders, we call KOLs, and KEEs. So that's another way of communicating. And the other way of communicating is like we have a medical education team where we put together all the sensitive information in a medical education format, like a training format, where we work with all those external stakeholders, especially HCPs, like the healthcare physicians and so on. So they communicate in a different format by just creating a brochure or maybe some training modules or something like that. For the training team, like insights and training team, they basically work with the MSLs and they train the MSLs to on how to use this scientific information appropriately and what to communicate, what not to communicate across organizations. So each division has its own way of communicating. I represent the medical communication division within the medical affairs, and I work mostly with the internal stakeholders. My communications is highly protected via email or maybe like in the phone conversations or in our own inbuilt portals or something like that. Did that answer your question, I believe?
Yes, yeah. We have now a couple of questions related to the career transition part, and really good question. How easy or difficult it is to transition into a role like yours right after PhD, or do you think postdoctoral experience is needed, or you think something even more than postdoctoral experience, which would be useful to transition into a position like yours? And the second part of that question, which is again very interesting, where do you go from here? Do you think this is the end? Are you hitting the roof, or there's more growth, room for growth and development in the future?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So yeah, they do expect some level of experience, but it doesn't have to be a postdoctoral training per se, but some level of research experience is desirable, is appreciated most of the time. But I've seen people fresh out of PhD get into an organization as a junior level associate and grow, along the way. That happened as well. I've seen many people. So especially I've seen in my kind of roles, a lot of PharmDs and MDs who have literally no experience in the ground. And but I shouldn't be saying that completely, but most of them, I would say, like PharmDs, they don't have experience, but they still have the scientific acumen and knowledge that they can use it in this kind of role. Yeah, I would say like 1 or 2 years of postdoctoral training is good to have, and while you do that, eventually I think you should think about building your like the other skills I was mentioning throughout my discussion so far, that all the transferable and the soft skills, and because what expected in an organization, because there are a lot of PhDs who apply for a job. Everyone is capable, everyone is smart, obviously. Like, if you have a PhD, I mean, it's a default that you should be smart, and nobody questions that. But why would some PhDs get into kind of a specific role is because they are able to tell the story better than others. That's exactly the difference between the others. So yeah, to tell the story, you need to build a story. So it takes time, like maybe like 2 years is more than enough. Maybe for some people, like 6 months is more than enough. But in my case, it took 6 years to build a story. So it all depends on where you are. So to build a story, you need to kind of put yourself in different in environment, in ecosystem, to understand collectively what is that you can offer, what is that you can take, and there's a lot of things you can learn from just by putting yourself in a different ecosystem. So when you get there, you will obviously find your own story, and you will tell the story when you've been interviewed, or when you wanted to get into a job. So yes, and to answer your second part of the question, no, I don't think I want to stop here, and that's not what my intention is driving going through all this process. Definitely, I wanted to move up in my career, so I have my own. I mean, when I wanted to move up in my career, it's not becoming like a senior director or VP. Yeah, that's a different route, and obviously everyone would love extra money. Why would not me? But the point here is that what is that I can bring value back to this kind of a function like a medical affairs. So what's coming in the future, right? Like, I know medical affairs function has been well established in the last 2 decades, and people understand the value and what's coming next. For example, I can tell like medical affairs is seriously thinking about bringing this artificial intelligence and machine learning technologies back into the medical affairs function to see how we can best interpret the information out there and consume that and make it better in our own products. So that is definitely coming in the next couple of years, I would say. I mean, I would be surprised if it happens next year, but a lot of industries are working towards that. A lot of industries are also working towards getting the real world evidence insights, like from the patient perspectives or the physician perspectives, trying to understand what the physician thinks about the drug, or trying to understand what the patients or the patient focus groups are thinking about the drug. And maybe those kind of information is going to help make our product better, right? So those are the insights. I mean, we have no protocol. There is no defined approach how to do that. We're still figuring out. That's exactly where the industry is looking for people who can find ways to bring that without, spending more money on that. So that's exactly the need is. So you should be able to identify those gaps and the needs, and if you are smart enough, or if you can find that route quick, and you can be the leader. So I'm trying my best to get in that kind of route. Anyway, I gave away my secrets, but I would love you to explore that, and if you find something, don't forget to share it with me.
Awesome. So we have a very interesting question by Rachel. This sort of goes into like what you've explained, that you interact with many different people, many different units, and it's, of course, you have to learn how to speak their language. And if you're working in your team, you really need to, in all this process, working team, working with different kind of people, sometimes, not directly with patients, but indirectly, being very sensitive. Something which is really needed there is something called as the emotional intelligence, right? These are the skills. Sometimes some people are born with it and they're really good at it. They are like, natural, like, connectors, networkers, and, they keep everyone's interest in mind. However, there are some of us like who might need some help, and, something which could be built as we go along. Do you have any advice on that as to like, how one could get there? Because to be very honest, maybe I should stop the recording at this point. Academia doesn't really give us a lot of space to develop those very important human skills. What are your views on that, and how people can actually hone and polish that?
You're right. Now, that's an interesting question, and you're right. And I can speak of right now that I'm outside of the academic research. I can say like it never helped me. It only showed me not to interact with people. I mean, in a way. So that's the culture we came up with. But yeah, that's a wonderful question, because that's one of the biggest criteria every industry is looking for: the diversity and inclusion. Like how do you understand people's problem when you work with them? Yes, and everyone is obligated to respond to your email. Everyone in the organization is obligated to answer your question. But there's a cultural gap. Like everyone has different way of thinking and different, and you don't know what he or she is going through when he's reading or she is reading your email. So we would like we people encourage that kind of a respect when you communicate, and yes, you need that work to be done for sure. I mean, there's no question about it. Like, but at the same time, yeah, and that's a skill everyone we all need to. I'm still working on it, but we all need to improve. That's the skill the industry is actually looking for, and anything you can show in progress about in that kind of area, it's definitely going to help you in that process of skill management skill or working with the people is not that easy. It doesn't sound that it may sound easy, but it's not that easy. So the conflict resolution, we deal with that every day at different, like I work with people back in Japan and India, or different in China. And so they all have, like, we have language barriers. We have different time zones we work with. And we have different priorities. Like everyone have their own goals. Like, just because it's my goal that I need to achieve, it doesn't mean that I can enforce people to work on my goals, because they have their own goals, right? So I need to find a way how I can best work with them. So we need to, it's not, I mean, again, I hate to say this, but in academia, it's interesting that we're always told that we need this information, but we were never told that when, you know? So that is the culture, at least in my case. I shouldn't be saying in general, but in my case, I was never told like when. But in industry, what we expect is that we need to plan ahead and work with the people accordingly and tell them when and how, and also try to understand what they may have to go through to get that done. And if there is anything they might have to struggle, you might have better find a way to work with them in that case. Like, you cannot just throw someone under the bus or just throw them into something just like, I don't care, I just need this get to be done. And that is not going to work in an industry. So it's a soft skill. I mean, and like you said, Harinder, some people have, it's in them already, but some people like me, especially, I need to work a lot on this. I'm still working on it.
So it sort of reminds me of like when I was going through something very similar. Somebody gave me an advice saying that, remember, just be human. Keep in mind when you started doing your PhD training and you picked up a topic because it was really close to your heart in terms of you wanted to treat this particular disease or you wanted to understand the disease better. So that's a humanistic angle, and that's why you got into doing research. But somewhere along the way, what happens is when you get so engrossed in your intellectual, like sort of like growth and really looking into data, that you lose that human angle. So maybe, one of the way to actually develop that is, which I was told, that just be human. When you go for interviews, just show what you are. When you interact with people, show honesty and sincerity from a humanistic angle. I think that really takes you a long way, that honesty. But
Yeah.
thanks for that. And yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, the culture of no. I was just going to add to what you said is the culture of read in the air doesn't work anymore, because you need to be explicit about what you say and what you expect. You can in academia, at least in my case, that we're always given some information and you need to figure out the rest of it. But that's not the case in industry, especially in pharmaceutical industries. You need to be extra clear in what you're asking for, what you're expecting people to do for you. So yeah, I just thought maybe I'll add to that.
Yeah. So there's another interesting question by Jesse, which is sort of like, related to the other one I was going to ask. So first of all, she wants to know, like, what does a typical day look like for you at your role? And then I want to add upon more like, how has pandemic affected that role now compared to how it was like in pre-pandemic environment? And how do you see the whole, like, medical affairs role changing moving forward? Because a lot of different, job sectors and responsibilities are evolving, and when we get into the post-pandemic world. So any ideas on that, how does your day look like pre and pandemic, and how it'll be in post-pandemic? And
Yeah.
how has your company or organization being affected due to pandemic?
Yeah, sure. To start with, I guess my day is always fun. I mean, especially in this role, I enjoy my day in the mornings. My meetings start mostly at 6:30 or 7 in the morning, because most of my counterparts are back in Asia. So, but I get to choose my day. I mean, I get to choose my time, and I kind of mix all my personal life and my work life together. So I don't see that any different anymore. So I've been very productive. That I think also answers your second part of the question, is that makes me very productive working from remote. So my company, especially after this pandemic and last summer, they decided to just go full remote. They said, you guys are very productive than before, so you better stay home and work and take care of your family, because that's more important. So yeah, my day, yeah, I mean, of course, like I said, I've worked with a lot of people across the globe, and my role in medical communication is basically to create a lot of materials, like training materials or scientific materials with scientific narratives and contents and all this evidence and everything to get put together in a format that everyone can have access to and can use that information in their external or internal communication, activities. So yeah, I plan I don't plan a day. In fact, I plan a month or sometimes a couple of weeks. And then I know what I'll be doing for the next couple of weeks or 2, 3 weeks, in at least per se. Then I will work on that. And basically what you would be doing mostly is to communicate with people and give them enough time, because and if you want someone to review some information, they are pretty busy. They may be busier than you. So they might need more than like a week or two. You may think in academic perspective, in academic research perspective, you don't need more time to read an article, but that's not the case here. You may need at least 2 weeks to for someone to review and approve like a 200-word document. So you need to plan ahead of time. That's exactly what I meant. So your work, your day, mostly goes by just planning for the next couple of weeks, and then just implement that action so that you get the right outputs the time you count for.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the second part of the question again is how things have changed in the COVID, but in medical affairs function, and it in fact went well than before COVID. It's actually working out pretty good in medical affairs function. In my role, I can tell like if I've been in the office, I would be at least 60% less productive than what I was than working from home, because I was able to achieve more of my goals than it was assigned to me in 2020. So it will be well recognized for that, and you will be compensated too, which is a good part, right? Because imagine like you're getting a 25% bonus just for achieving your goals, like of what you make in a year. So which is a big deal, and that's a motivation as well, because that definitely is a motivation for many people. And which if I can do things in my own pace, well planned, and still achieve my goals more than what I am assigned to, well, that's all the organization is looking for, right? And going forward, I think this is only going to get better, because I was mentioning at least my organization decided to go remote. They have a huge 2 buildings in the Chicagoland suburbs there, which they decided to rent out one of them. So which means they have a huge plan towards making mostly remote, which they also believe that people will going to do better at home. It's a trust the organization had, and they see it's working. So I guess it's going to be better in the future, I hope.
So we have another.
Did I cover all the 3 parts of the question?
Yes, you did. You did.
Right. Okay.
We have another very interesting question by Daniel, and this sort of like goes big to like your background and my background, both of us being international scholars, right? And coming from different country, and especially if you're coming from a country where there are many languages are spoken, you might know like 4 or 5 languages like me, and there are a lot of us like on the call here who are international or who do know a lot of other languages and different cultures. So Daniel wants to know like how do companies value language or cultural skills fluency during hiring process and beyond? Example, like if you have fluency in Japanese language and that company or part of the company is based in Japan, is that, of course, it's viewed favorably, but otherwise, like, how much of an impact does it have if you have fluency in a different language and cultural knowledge?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. But at least in my experience, they don't look in terms of a language, but they actually look in terms of the culture, right? So yeah, I mean, so being a global organization, most of the things what we do is in English. Yes, it's an advantage if you know Japanese to interact with your Japanese colleagues, but the Japanese colleagues, like you're not the only person who will be interacting from US, with the Japanese colleagues. So I think they don't put too much weight on the language itself. I may be wrong. This is what my understanding is, but they will definitely value the culture. They will definitely value that part of the thing, which you can understand their culture and respect and the way you can work with them and the way you should be communicating with them and so on. So that's definitely been well appreciated in an organization like this. So if you have an experience working with people from different countries and different geographical locations, and you understand the pain, like that's definitely been accepted. Appreciated by the organizations. Awesome. Yeah, language, I'm not pretty sure, but it might be an advantage in some cases, but not always. That's what I think.
Okay. Yeah. Well. Okay. I was going to wrap up, but there's one more question by Rachel. Is there anything you don't like about medical affairs role? And that would be the last question. We can wrap up then.
Well, maybe it's too early for me to say that because as of now, I'm enjoying what I do. But yes, I will hit the wall at one point where I think, no, this is not enough. Then I want to do something different. Then I will choose my way at that point. But at this moment, I guess I'm still in the phase of learning and then enjoying what I do. And I'm posed with a lot of challenges, which is what making my role more exciting. But the other interesting thing about medical affairs is that if you don't like something, yeah, you can always move around within medical affairs. There's a lot of options around within the same function, so you can still do it. And most of the companies like that because if they think like you would be a good asset for a specific function within that medical affairs thing, they would encourage you to do that. In fact, they would train you to do that. So I'm working with a mentor within the organization who is actually helping me to see how I can move within the organization. So that's something which I would also recommend, that find a mentor for yourself. Like, mentor is definitely helpful. So everything what I said in the last 45 minutes or so, and I may be speaking now because after this many years of experience, but everything I was guided by a mentor throughout my transition period. So I would recommend you to find a mentor outside of academic institution. That would be even better. If you can find someone who can work with you and who can help you and help you, identify the gaps which you would like, which you should be filling out, and so you can be in a better position in an industry, that would be very helpful.
Awesome. So we have one last minute, and in 1 minute, if you were to give one last final piece of advice to people who are in PhD training and going to finish very soon, or postdoctoral training, who are interested in a role like yours, what should they be doing now? How should they be effectively using their time?
Yeah, so like I was mentioning, I had one slide which I didn't show, but I can just speak off on that. Give me 1 second, let me open that up. So yeah, I mean, like I was mentioning, you find a mentor. I mean, if you are planning to transition your career in the next year or so, maybe in 6 months or so, the first thing I would do is find a mentor, find a person who can work with you. I'll be more than happy if anyone wanted, to be associated with you. I will be more than happy to work with you on that. Give my own, it's not advice, but my own experience and the way I would see it from my industry perspective. I'll be more than happy to work with some of you if you're interested. And then, as much as possible, find people's time to get some informational discussions, like get some interviews. Like, no one would say, in my experience, one of my mentors said in the initial stages of my transition is that, don't send your resume and don't ask for people's like 1 hour time. Just tell them like I need 15 minutes. No one would say no. I mean, that actually worked for me. I spoke to many people as possible. I got a lot of information just in the 10-15 minutes. So just get those informational interviews and start training yourself for your new career. Just think like, okay, you are ready for the next career, whatever the career you want it to be in. Just train your brain that you are ready for your next career. Never postpone that. Okay, I will wait for this to happen before I do this. So there's no stage where you can just say, okay, now I'm ready to transition. So there's no stage to do that. There's nothing defined like that. I would say like just start now. I mean, you would have already started, but I would say like if not, just do it now. And there's an exciting journey in front of you. Just look for that and forget about what's happening right now. And if you are ready to transition, if you wanted to transition, this is the time. This is the best time of the era, I would say.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Sundivakkam, for your time. This is very, very helpful discussion, especially when there's a number of questions